first question, and we'll start with Sal on this one. The council recently passed a special business license for care facilities to help, in part, to help pay for emergency services. But given this is co-hosted by the chamber, we wanted to start off with a business question. Are you in favor or against, or somewhere in the middle, about the city further establishing a business licensing program?
Yeah, I am in favor of the city establishing a business licensing program for care facilities. The reason that the city established that program is that we have an ambulance service that provides coverage to both McMinnville and the areas outside of McMinnville. And what has happened over the last 10 years is that the recoupment rates from Medicaid, the reimbursement rates from Medicaid have dropped significantly. So that now we're only getting currently $200 per call in Medicaid reimbursements at those care facilities, when the actual cost of an ambulance call is about $1,600. And so in order to reduce the call volume on our first responders and to make sure that we're accurately capturing the costs of ambulance service, the city staff recommended and the council agreed that we should pass a business license so that that money doesn't come out of the general fund, which would be paid for by all taxpayers. That is a problem both in the city and outside of the city. Through the research that I've done this year, we were able to identify about $350,000 in general fund revenue that is going towards paying for services for folks who live outside of the city. That is a significant problem. It is also contributing to a critical staffing level among our fire department. We currently have basically too few firefighters to meet the service level needs that we have in terms of the call volume. As you've probably seen the signs around town, the Professional Firefighters Association endorsed me as the candidate they support to lead them in the effort to address that critical staffing need.
And clarification, you can respond on this when it comes back around, but speaking on the care facilities businesses, but also just business licenses in general, if you're in favor of business licenses on all businesses in McMinnville, or case by case like it was with the care. And
yeah, Jen.
Let's move on to Leanne, and then we'll come back to you on that. Yeah.
So the question again was about all business licenses,
right.
To include the
So either business licenses
facility
on all businesses, or as I said, somewhere in the middle, if it's okay to do business licenses on certain industries like the care facilities, like was just done with the care facilities.
Well, from what I understand that the council was attempting here was to help mitigate some of the budgetary constraints that the fire department has faced through our emergency services. Emergency services are covered through several means, mostly in our general fund. This is where the people have to decide. My management and financial background says to me that this is an area where we need to address the gaps. So when it comes to business licensing, this is really designed to make sure that we are covered in areas where we need to be covered in the city. Business licenses in general not necessarily are going to help the city in a larger way. This is primarily for our emergency services. That's why that was passed, was to help that process and basically stop the bleeding a little bit. But as far as a general business license, I don't agree. I don't think that will help us in a larger way. I think we can find other revenues to be able to take care of our city's problems.
Chris?
My answer is going to be a lot shorter than either of these. I'm pretty much in opposition of most increase in business fees. I don't think that's really the way to handle situations at this time. When it comes to this specific one, yes, I do understand. Part of it was not just to raise funds, but part of it was also punitive. The idea was to try, as I understand it, we were seeing a large portion of the calls being disproportionately from these specific areas. So by increasing the fees to those specific areas, the hope is to try to cut down on the number of calls. So, in that sense, I can kind of see a need where that might prove to be beneficial. But in general, I don't think business fees raise enough funds. And ultimately, all business fees end up happening is when you pass a business fee, is it gets passed on to the consumer, which in a way is just a regressive tax onto the consumer. I don't think that's a good idea either. So in general, I would say I would be opposed to business fees. On a case-by-case basis, I might make an exception. I'm willing to learn, so I'd have to see.
And let's go back on around, and I'll let you guys go a few seconds over if you need, but I'll let Sal answer that also. But then on top of that, do you feel that McMinnville is a business-friendly community? Kind of playing off the idea of business licenses. Sal, go ahead.
Yeah, so the business license in this case was to address a very specific need where staff could identify a budget shortfall that was affecting taxpayers and affecting our city's bottom line. So in that case, I definitely supported a business license. And I would probably have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I'm generally against raising revenue unless there's a specific need or purpose behind that, and usually favor some kinds of offsets in that. Is McMinnville business-friendly? Yes, I'd say McMinnville is very business-friendly. And this council in particular has been quite successful at recruiting new investment into the community. For example, the investment that voters passed that improved the Alpine Street District has already brought in, I think, $2.5 million in private investment. That's money that's going to get added to our tax base, in addition to extending the magic of 3rd Street into that area off of the main downtown core. So yes, very business friendly. I'm very appreciative of the work that McMinnville's Economic Development Partnership, City Club, and the Downtown Association and all of our partners, including Visit McMinnville, which is funded through transient lodging tax at the city.
Lynn, any additional on business licenses, or just is McMinnville business friendly in your eyes?
Well, you know, owning 2.5 businesses, I could say yes, they are business friendly. However, we have a lack of space a lot of times. So I think, in a sense, you know, we are business friendly on a business licensing level, but you know, as far as finding locations, it tends to pose a difficulty for people that are coming into the area. I think on another level, for business friendly, you know, the difficulty in expanding your business is also being marketable. So you want to be able to bring more people in on a management level. You want to entice them with our location, our area, but also, you know, they have to find a place to live. So a lot of times I think businesses struggle because people are not able to find homes locally. They're going on the outskirts of town, and or people from Portland are moved here and are trying to move here. So as far as business friendly, yes, I do believe it's business friendly, but I think we have a long way to go.
I'm going to take right off on that "we have a long way to go" statement. You know, the way I look at our business environment is we seem to be fairly friendly to the wineries. We seem to be fairly friendly to tourism. We seem to be fairly friendly to the local business folks that have been here for a long period of time. But we don't seem to be doing a very good job of enticing anything other than service industry into this area. We have seen the median income in McMinnville is 15% below the state average, state median income. That's a problem. That problem exists specifically because we have seen a ton of our industry leave the area, and that's something that needs to be addressed. The city council has done a fantastic job when it comes to tourism, but I'll just tell you, service and all of the, you know, the touting of Alpine Avenue. I think it was Jeb Ledeen who said it best. That was a head scratcher, and all we're bringing into that is a bunch of service level jobs again. So I think we need some work there.
All right, moving on. Of course,
Can we get a respond on this?
I would say maybe save it for a concluding statement on that. Where was I? Of course, we can have a candidate forum without a discussion on homelessness here. You know, and we'll start with you, Leanna. Has this?
Sure.
A couple years ago, I think, you know, homelessness is not a new issue for McMinnville, but maybe just invisibility it has risen in the last couple of years in both the downtown core and the neighborhoods. In your opinion, has the city done an adequate job responding to that visible increase in homelessness? And what, in your opinion, are the next steps needed in regards of helping out on that issue?
Well, as far as visibility goes, I think we recently, as a city, passed an ordinance to remove our folks from the downtown corridor, but at the same time, we are finding out that there are amendments, First Amendment rights, or rights that we are encroaching on when we disallow people from being present on city property. Public property is for everyone, and homelessness is not a crime. Homelessness is not something that people often choose. Sometimes they're put into that situation. Sometimes it's a transitional process, and sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. For the most part, I think our city is doing a fabulous job connecting, but the action is not coming through that connection. I think Affordable Housing Committee has been doing a great job progressing forward in that area, but when it comes to putting a stop on the process of homelessness, you're not going to do it. It's not something that a whole city can change overnight. It takes time and effort and a community to come together and realize the problem, pull into the solutions, and take action. Each one of us are responsible in many ways. The city is not responsible to find you a home, but I believe that they're responsible to make sure that you have a safe place to live. And that includes everyone. Self-sufficiency, we all want to get there. How is the problem? So once we can come together and realize that we have solutions that we can use, the next step is action. So hopefully we'll find a solution that will benefit all. Thanks.
Chris?
Now, specifically, the question is regarding.
Has the city done an adequate job responding to what seems, as a visible increase in homelessness recently, and what are the next steps needed in regards of helping curb the homeless population?
So let's deal with this in two parts. The first part being, as I mentioned, the city has two roles when it comes to homeless. That being policing, and the second part to that being passing regulatory framework. So let's deal with the regulatory framework. On that side, I think the city has done some good things. I like Ordinance 5057. I think that was a great step forward in allowing private parties to be able to assist where they can assist without unduly affecting their neighbors. I thought that was a very commendable action and really something we ought to be doing. I was very disappointed. I sat in the council meeting for that and have to concur with Sal regarding his response to what happened in that council meeting. It was a sad response, given that the idea was to try to help. But I want to talk about policing because I think we have a real problem with policing. We are seeing an increase in crime. I don't know if this is going to be addressed later, if I'm going to be able to answer the questions on crime later. Will I have that opportunity, or should I hit it here?
I will go ahead and hit it here.
Okay. We are seeing an increase in crime. According to FBI.gov, violent crime has been on a steady increase for 10 years. That is the absolute facts. According to cityrating.com, they are projecting from 2016 to 2018 a 19% increase in property crime and a 12.5% increase in violent crime. Now, if those numbers don't say to you, we got a crime problem, then I'm sorry, you're reading different numbers than I'm seeing. We have a crime problem, and that is specifically on the back of the city, and there is definitely a link between homelessness and crime. These statistics have been played out and proven time and time again. I'm not saying that all of them are criminal, but that's the job we have to do. When it comes to the caring side of this, that she talked about that's Yamhill County, and we need to collaborate with them.
So Oregon is third out of 50 states in the growth of homelessness over the last 2 years. We're fourth overall in the total percentage of our population that's unsheltered and homeless. So the problem that we have in McMinnville is actually a problem that we have as a state. And as a state, Oregon has not been very effective at addressing the homelessness crisis. There are two sides to this crisis as far as the city's response, and I think the city has done an adequate response given the challenges that we face. The first side is from public safety, In terms of public safety, we've added 2 patrol officers this year to the staff. In the last 2 years, we've added a mental health officer whose role is to go and assist county mental health staff and others to address issues with people who are homeless or other people who are in mental health crisis. That officer has developed a great reputation among both our homeless people and families who are dealing with mental illness in their families. That's been a very positive step for the city. In terms of the ordinances, I think Chris mentioned, we've done, I think, a good job of passing what we can to address the issue from a public safety standpoint. However, our laws are bounded by the U.S. Constitution, as Leanna mentioned. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals basically said that it's a violation of the Eighth Amendment to our Constitution to move someone from a public space who has nowhere else to go. So that also necessitates a compassionate response. And the city's primary role in the compassionate response is to organize the different entities, nonprofit, and other government units to address the issue. In our case, what we see is that there's a lack of funding for supportive housing, permanent and transitional supportive housing at the state level. Oregon has about 6,400 homeless people, chronic homeless people, and the current funding is very difficult to get to those groups of people. So as the city's board member for the League of for the Regional Council of Governments, part of my role is to try and make policymakers aware of the challenges that our cities face so that they can adequately fund us. Thank you.
And we have another minute to respond to anything or to continue on what the next steps the city should do regarding homelessness.
Well, I didn't really, like my colleagues here, I didn't really get a chance to address the public safety part. You know, I do agree in many ways with both of their direction as far as public safety goes. Public safety is a necessary thing, but so is homes. And so is the ability to have a home. You know, right now our market is very saturated with a lack of homes, saturated with the lack of. But it's still, it's truth be told, it is very difficult for anyone to get homes right now, including in our area. So the homelessness, again, is not going to be solved overnight. It's not going to be solved on a city level, on a general term. We can help work with our organizations right now that are in place. We have public safety issues, but that is across the board. There are ways to accommodate us, but again, we need to work together on it.
Just another minute on the issue of homelessness.
I certainly don't disagree. We need to work together with those that do things well. NGOs, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, Yamhill County, HUD, all of these agencies work together to address the homeless. My point is that as a counselor, we need to know what our role is. Our role is police. Our role is regulatory framework. Our role, unfortunately, is not social services. And I mentioned this already, but we have an incredible and that came from the city manager. That didn't come from me. We have an incredible program coming online in the next, I don't know what the time frame is, by Hope on the Hill. That's going to be providing some housing first with some required responsibilities together. It's going to be a game changer. It's amazing, and it's not going to take us a dime of taxpayer dollar. So I'm looking forward to that.
Sal, one more minute on the issue.
Yeah, just speaking to that issue, I am really enthusiastic about the work that Hope on the Hill is doing, and we have other partners that are doing a lot of work. YCAP has 50 supportive housing placements through their organization, and Gospel Rescue Mission has expanded from 17 to 64 beds. The city provides about 2,500 showers for homeless people every year through generous support from the Give a Little Foundation. However, despite all of this support from the charitable and nonprofit world, there is still a need for housing for people who are not good candidates for market housing. Most of the people who are homeless on our streets in Mcminnville are not good candidates for Section 8 housing. Most of that requires market rate housing. So what they really need is supportive housing, and other cities are really taking the lead on it. Salem is considering a bond measure in the upcoming year. Eugene is taking leadership on this, and it's not just the housing portion. It's also, we need to do a better job of assessment up front so that we can divert people to the services that are available to them. Thank you.
All right, we'll start our next question with Chris, I believe we're on. I think in a lot of these forums we talk about major issues that are discussed and highly visible, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to answer what are maybe some of the lesser issues or issues that aren't being discussed or aren't out in the public as much that as a counselor you would like to bring, that you would air greater and bring out to the public?
There's all kinds of little things that just like our planning problems that I see that I don't understand the decision-making process that I think maybe a little more thought and planning can go into. For instance, planter boxes sitting in the middle of 2nd Street that are really right-of-way hazards. We've seen semis stuck in them. You've got mailbox painting that isn't done accurately. Just little things that need to be kind of caught up on. Probably the biggest one that I hear as I go door to door, and I've probably knocked over half of the ward at this point, door to door, because what's important to me is hearing from the constituents. It's not hobnobbing in Salem, it's not business folks, it's going door to door. And what I've heard from those folks, surprisingly, the type of things that bother them are, what are we gonna do about the trees that are breaking up my sidewalk? What are we gonna do? It's those kinds of issues that I think we need to be looking at. I talk a lot about crime because I see that as being an issue. If you're a part of Nextdoor, which is an app that you can get on, you'll see postings regularly about stuff that's happening in the neighborhood. We've got a problem, and I'd like to see that addressed and dealt with. So I kind of going to go back to that every time. I think that's probably the main ones that I would say the ones which would be the trees in the planters are probably the big one that nobody talks about ever.
So?
The most commonly asked questions on the doorstep for me as well relate to transportation and things that are affecting people directly in their neighborhoods. So those are always present. To me, the biggest issue that we're looking at in the next couple of years it relates to fire safety. I mentioned earlier that we have a critical challenge with our staffing level. And so we're going to need to go forward with either expanding the fire district to include to ensure that the rural folks are paying more of their fair share in terms of the costs, which isn't really happening today, or some other measure in order to get the staffing levels up so that our first responders can be safe when they're out either on ambulance calls or fire calls. One of the biggest challenges that we face as a city, and this is something that every government unit in the state, every city, every school district, the state of Oregon faces, is the impact of older unreimbursed PERS expenses on our city budget. Currently that's $1 out of every 5 that we spend on payroll. So when I look at our city staff and I see, for example, 4 firefighters, I really think there should be 5 people standing there, and there would be, but for those sunk costs attached to old PERS expenses, and that has an impact on everything that we do. It has an impact on police staffing levels, it has an impact on fire staffing levels, and it has an impact on parks. And that's one of the reasons why I spend a lot of time working with office holders and other city governments, because the way that we can solve this problem, the way that we can address this problem, is to work collaboratively, to share information, and then make sure that the policymakers who actually have access to state resources understand the scope and scale of the problem and how it impacts us. So those are probably 2 of the bigger challenges that we face, and I thank you for the opportunity to answer the question.
And Lena, on issues you would like to believe need to be given more attention or not, smaller things that are not discussed enough?
Well, nothing seems to be small in our town. We all have our issues that affect and impact us as a community. Primarily when I get out and talk to the community, I do also hear about the sidewalks. I have a sidewalk in front of my house that is cracked, and this is an easement that the city uses, but it's still our responsibility as homeowners to fix those pieces. So that is something that a lot of people are concerned about. The trees are no longer able to be replaced on that level. But there's also mailboxes that people are parking in front of, and so people are are having a difficult time getting their mail delivered. 7 cities surrounding us have ordinances that disallow people from parking in front of their mailboxes. We found, all of these cities have to put ordinances in order to protect the rights of their citizens. There's crime statistically is not being properly addressed. Historically, back in the 90s, the crime was higher, but now we are faced with the difficulty of tracking that. And social media is now a big presence in our life. So people are going on to Yamco Watch to report crime rather than calling it in. I would just encourage everyone, if there is a crime, please report it to the police department so they can properly address and track our crime rates, because our crime rates are not, it's a statistical part, it's financial background. I monitor that piece. So of course we want to address the areas in our community that need the most help. But businesses you're getting things stolen from them just as much as residentials. The other issue I would say is public bathrooms. I've heard we need one. We need one over here. We need one to support our community. So these are the issues that I see and discussed often. Thank you again.
Yeah, and we'll do another minute. Again, it could be small things or medium or larger things that you as a counselor would heighten the level of communication about.
I was trying to stay on small things.
Yeah, give me the tip.
But you start talking about larger things. The staffing problem in the fire department is major. You have a morale problem between the volunteers and the day-to-day work, those that are actually being paid for the job. That's a major issue. You have a retention problem. We're being picked off left, right, and center from the larger agencies. We need to address that. What's causing that? What are the root causes to that? I've been talking to volunteers to get an idea where they're coming from. And I've talked to several of the fire department, talked to Chief Leifert, and he has admitted this is a major issue. Obviously, it's made it to the statewide news, so this is a major issue for Mcminnville. And then of course rent and housing prices in this community. We haven't hit that yet, but statewide, SB 100 was touted to be a great Senate bill that was going to be the new way we were going to handle all of growth and zoning, and it turned out to be a real problem. So that's going to have to get addressed as well. PERS is a major issue, but that's going to be a state issue to resolve. That's not something we're going to do at a local level unless we're willing to take the steps to do our own 401k.
Sal, another minute on issues you'd like to raise higher than they are now.
Yeah, housing affordability is a huge issue. And again, this is a problem that affects the state. Senate Bill 100 is part of that problem. But McMinnville's going through a period of gentrification over the next 10 years that is going to affect all of us. It's going to make it hard for people who are coming here to work to afford a place to live. And so we're having to look at changes to our city code, zoning changes to free up housing inventory. The good news is we have 600 market rate multifamily units coming through the planning process now, so that should relieve some of the crunch that people have for housing. But still going forward, again, this is an issue where we as a city are not going to be able to solve it on our own. We need partners. We need to be able to work with folks at the Oregon legislature who are policymakers, work with the county to make sure that we're able to meet those needs. And we are starting that planning process now, going through our available lands inventory and our city's lands inventory, and we will be going through a process of adding in available lands within the next 2 to 3 years to address this.
Thanks. And another minute on any issues in the table.
Thank you. I don't just bring up the issues, I bring solutions. And that's what's important here. It's not just complaining about something, it's bringing something to the table that is effectively going to resolve problems. If not, you discuss and you take action. PERS is a local problem, but it's not. It's affecting us locally, but we can't resolve it on a local level. We do have to rely on our representatives on a state and federal level in order to resolve that PERS issue. In the meantime, we have to work with what we have. We have 80% of that budget that needs to be properly disseminated amongst all the departments that are necessary, and lower departments that need help, like our fire department and our police services absolutely need our assistance. And that's something where perhaps other streams of revenue is supposed to come into play. Housing, we have 9,000 veterans in this community, and 3,000 are homeless. Half the population of homeless are vets. And I want to see us connect on a higher level. Thank you.
Thank you. For the next question, we'll refer to one of the bullet points on the strategic plan that the city is working on. That bullet point is guide growth and development strategically, responsively, and responsively to enhance McMinnville's unique character. Question is, going forward, philosophically, kind of what is good growth to you in this community, and what would you as a policymaker hope to push for when it comes to growth as we are becoming more of a desirable area and well-known area to live? And starting with you, Sal, on this one. Sorry.
So the question is, how do we guide growth strategically, responsibly, and kind of think forward future? Well, I think the city generally has done a good job of planning for growth and planning for the future. Historically, we have done a good job of investing in water assets. As a result, we have plenty of room to grow in terms of water. McMinnville Water and Light also has some of the cheapest power sources available to anybody in the country, so that is a huge asset that we have that is put in place because of good long-term planning. When we think about what the current council has been doing, again, we put a bond measure forward to voters 2 years ago to do some infrastructure improvements in the downtown core. Ahead of that process, we did a lot of engagement with cities, with business owners, with people to come up with those plans. And again, the result has been really positive. It's huge improvements in infrastructure in the downtown by the time that's finished, and also a big increase in investment. And I think that's important because we were able to put a small amount of public monies into developing the Alpine District, and that triggered, and I said earlier, $2.5 million. That doesn't include the big Atticus Hotel across the street from the News Register. And what happens when you're able to make those kinds of improvements, attract new business investment, that improves your tax rolls at the city without raising taxes. It improves the overall quality of life in the city, and it creates the kinds of jobs and opportunities that we need. With respect to business retention and recruitment, I think we've done a pretty good job of that. Betty Lou's is an example of a nice homegrown business that's continuing to grow. And I think that's kind of the model that we have as a city, is we try and nurture companies that are here and help them to reach their potential. And we're doing a little bit in terms of business recruitment that I don't think I have time to answer. So.
But you will. Leanna, 2 minutes on strategic and responsible growth moving ahead for McMinn.
So I think that in all strategic planning, you need to understand the balance. You need to understand your revenue streams. You need to understand where you're going with your vision, your mission statement. McMinnville has been growing continuously since we first started this town. It's had its ups and downs, but really it's about embracing the balance with both residents and businesses alike. It's not just in the area of tourism, not just in the area of business, but also in residential. We do need to increase our urban growth boundaries, because without having the availability of land, people can't build smaller homes at smaller prices, or homes at all. We have companies out there like J&M are trying to place homes on properties, and people want to live in McMinnville because, yes, we have the lowest utility rates statewide. And so why wouldn't they want to live here? We have a good community, a good support structure, great schools. We're one of the top in the state. So why wouldn't anybody want to live here? But of course, in order to do that, you have to be able to work with people in order to make those realizations happen. Strategic planning is an excellent thing that we've needed for a long time, and I'm so glad that we've moved forward in that. As we become more populated, we do become more desirable, but we need to address the problems now before they get too far out of hand. So, thank you.
Chris?
So I had the opportunity to sit down with Heather Richards and really enjoyed the conversation that I had with her. She was expressing how she wants to set up planning 4 generations out. That's her goal. That's not necessarily a city goal. And I thought, that's pretty remarkable. To think that far out is very important. When we look right now at what's happened in the city, I guess if you break it down to land growth versus business growth, in either case, I think we're lacking. We certainly have not done a good job of making sure we have plenty of land to make room for growth in the population as it happens. The result of that is we don't have enough houses to meet the population that's here. We have a problem, rents are increasing. All of this is happening because there's just not enough availability of inventory. As inventory increases, prices come down. It's just the nature of the way the beast works. I don't blame the city entirely for the land growth problem. They sure gave it a good college try back in the 90s and early 2000s to try to expand the urban growth boundary and got shot down pretty good. But it's something that needs to be at the top of the list. Business growth, statistically, we've seen it. We've watched them leave. We've watched Hewlett-Packard's gone. We've watched Evergreen Aviation for different reasons, but we haven't seen large organizations like that come in. We are not doing a good job of attracting the higher paying industry jobs into this community. And we need to. We need to find out where we're failing, where we're making those mistakes. I don't have all the answers. I'm a collaborator. I want to work together to find what those solutions are. I don't know them, but I do know the problem exists. I know hiding my head under the sand and saying, oh no, everything's great, isn't going to solve it. We need to be working on that. Again, median incomes 15% below the state is a real big problem. And that's because we're predominantly ag and service industries.
So another minute on growth of the city.
Yeah, just a couple of points. Another reason why income levels are a little bit lower in McMinnville is one of the biggest categories of people who move here, retirees. They tend to not be as high an income category, even though they might have sold a house somewhere else and have some equity in that. A lot of politicians talk about economic development. I'm going to bring jobs here. I'm going to bring in the new jobs. What are we doing not to bring, what are we doing wrong? There's very little a politician can do to create jobs and to grow. But one of the things we have done is exactly one of the things you can do, which is to invest public money in an area like Alpine, redevelop it, and make it an attractive place for investors to come. And that's exactly what's happened in that area. And that's one of the reasons why that's a good success story for McMinnville. Another company that we recruited in from outside is TRW. I think they now have 80 or 90 employees system-wide. They're in one of the Evergreen Aviation buildings. Yes, we've had a couple of companies leave. They didn't leave because they didn't like McMinnville, Chris. Evergreen went under. Hewlett-Packard cut back their staffing. So it's not the case that the city did anything to cause those companies to leave. They just had a business model that over time didn't work. So I'll leave it at that.
And Leanna, I think you have one more minute on strategic and responsible growth.
Well, one of the things that I recognize with our city is we have as many volunteer hours that go in as paid hours. And our city is great when it comes to connecting on that level. That's another desirable trait of a city, is to understand that there are levels, the charitable levels as well as city levels, that people really want to help each other here. When you're divisive, when you're separated as a community, it shows. So what I want to see us do as we go through this strategic planning process is to make sure that we have engagement in mind, that we have stakeholders in mind. The stakeholders are not just our businesses. They are our residents too. They are our people that are coming in to visit us. They see McMinnville through our area, through our people. Let's keep it happening.
All right, thank you. And we'll finish last question. I think we're going to go with Chris's last one. Oh, did you not get a minute there?
I don't think
I
got
thought you started on that one. Apologies. You do another minute on that, Chris.
Thank you. I think your initial question is, what is good growth? And good growth is balanced growth. It's growth for the residential community that keeps up with the actual growth of population. Good growth is growth in the business community that keeps up with providing livable wage jobs and high paying jobs for our residents. Good growth is growth that actually meets all of the different needs of our community. And that's what I would aim for. I'm not interested, you know, one of the things that I've heard talked about is some people want to keep McMinnville small. They don't want to let it grow at all. I concur with Leanna that we have to have balanced growth that allows for some growth to match with population, but I'm also not interested in becoming Beaverton.
Thank you, and we'll start the next one with Leanna.
Okay.
I'm getting mixed up here.
Sure.
A little bit more specific question for this one. I think there's been maybe just small talks as the parks bond is coming to an end and the projects from our previous one. Looking ahead, would you be in support of a parks bond for future parks growth? Also, the issue of maintenance has come up in the last year, and along with improvements to not just the parks but our aquatic center and our community center and items around that issue.
Well, as I mentioned briefly earlier about public bathrooms, and this is something that the community cries out for. You know, we have great parks, but they are in need of repair. You know, the Dragon Park over here behind the library was something that I brought my children to, and the community came together to build that. It has a legacy. It has some meaning and some really strong rooted connections in our community. We want to see that maintained. We want to see our aquatic center maintained and our community center, because these are gathering places for our city, and it really helps support the community in a big way. So absolutely I would support another bond for our parks. I think it's vital for our community's growth and sustainability.
So one of the things the city has started to do is they're doing an inventory assessment of all the properties that we have. And I think that is a much sorely needed project that needed to be done a long time ago, so that we know which buildings need to be addressed and how quickly they need to be addressed. The Public Works building is in serious damage. It's got some real problems. And so depending on how that bond measure was framed, yes, I would be interested in seeing some of that happen. The other thing I'd like to see happen is every time we put together a bond project, for instance, all of this development we've done, 2nd Street, out on Hill Road, over on Alpine, that we need to have some portion of that budget be ongoing maintenance into that project. Because what we have done over the last 20 years is we've added more and more and more work to the Public Works Department, but we've done nothing to fund the Public Works Department. So these poor folks are now at the same staffing as they were in the 90s, trying to do all of the added work we've added to them since then. I don't think that's fair to ask them to do. I think that's putting an awful lot on them. And so I think as city councilors, it behooves us to take the time to actually make sure we include that as part of our process when we're looking at development. On any bond measure and any money spent, I'm going to be a watchdog for you folks, because I feel like, I'm sorry, you look at the Alpine development, to me it's a head scratcher. Jeb Bladine said it himself in his own whatchamacallit, that it was a head scratcher. And to a lot of people in McMinnville, when you look at that project, they think, I gave you money and you spent $1 million a block for that? And so the next time you come to them for money, unless you do a really good job between now and the next time, they're not gonna wanna give you money again, because they're seeing waste. So any money that comes by me, I'm gonna make sure is handled well and we don't have a backlash.
Comments on District Parks bond and
Yeah, Chris had it correct with regard to the building inventory that the city's doing. And that's a first step to whether we do a parks bond or a fire bond, addressing the issues that we have with city buildings. From my point of view, as we look at the idea of a parks bond, I really think we should be thinking in terms of a kids bond, because we have both the library facility that's in need of updating and improvement, as well as the pool that is also past its life cycle. So and in terms of how we approach that, what I think we should do, and what we have always done as a city, is put together a group of citizens to sit down, start talking about different ideas, and brainstorming, and that'll be a process that will start pretty shortly after that inventory is done. I have to say, Chris, you've a couple of times mentioned that Jeb Ledeen does not support the Alpine Street
No, I said he called
improvements,
it a head scratcher.
and frankly, that's false. The implication's false that it's not supported by Jeb and others in this community. And I'd say that you're just wrong. The amount of money that was spent on that, the public funds have generated a tremendous amount of investment capital, private investment into that area that is going to have a huge and long-lasting positive benefit on this city. So don't think you could be any more wrong about the work that was done in that particular area, or the popularity of it. Every person I've talked to is quite happy with the improvements that are happening both in Alpine Street and in the downtown core.
Most of your residents.
Well, you know what, Chris? We're both knocking a lot of doors in that district, so.
Anything else on parks or future bond measure?
I agree with these guys. No, I'm just kidding. I actually, everything is a process, and our bond measures are going to take some dedication and time from all parties that are involved. Even in grant funding, you have a process in place for a reason. You have checks and balances, you have accountability. All of it is a process that it takes time and good leadership to oversee. It takes people that are willing to roll up their sleeves, and we have plenty of people like that in our community. So I'm proud to say that process will be a great one once we start really working towards that goal.
Chris, another minute?
Yeah, let me be clear. Jeb Ledeen did not state whether he was for or against it in his article. His article just made the comment that it was a head scratcher. And I think to most of the cities, the people I've talked to that have seen it, that is exactly their response. They look at Alpine development, and they say to themselves, okay, you want to turn this into mini Pike Place Market? You've got all of these storage facilities that aren't going anywhere. You've got R&B rubber that's not going anywhere. You've got some real areas in there that are not going to go anywhere anytime soon. And so spending literally, yes, $2 million was matched from a grant, but literally spending $1 million a block is a head scratcher to most people who look at that. And to me, it's about perception, because the next time you come for money, if you've sent the taste in the mouth of the voters that you're going to use it in such a way that it's not effective, they're not likely to give it to you.
Sal, one more minute on, I guess we're talking bond projects at this point.
Yeah, again, I'd say that $2 million brought in, upwards of 2.5 plus maybe $4.5 million in new investment into this city. That's money that gets added to our tax rolls. The Hubert Shoe Factory, which was in terrible condition, is now going to be a marketplace. So I'm really enthusiastic about the developments there. I think they're going to serve the city well over time, and I'm frankly just shocked that my opponent would kind of stake his hat on opposing really one of the most consequential developments that we've had in the city in quite some time.
All right, we've reached end of our questions. Each of you will have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and I think we're moving on over to you, Chris, to start off.
I go first at the end, like I did at the beginning.
So the odd number really screwed this up.
I shouldn't go first at the end.
Do we have a volunteer to?
I mean, I will, but I shouldn't.
Leanna, would you like to go first?
Either way.
I'll go.
Okay.
So, as I said, I'm a geek. I own ActiPro Computers downtown. I'm running because I love McMinnville. I was raised here. Came here when I was 12. This is my hometown. Some of the sparring between Sal and I aside, I'm a collaborator. I'm somebody who wants to work to see what's best for McMinnville. I'm not interested in a fight. It may seem like it, but I'm really not. I do look at the community and I look at the council, and it looks to me like the council's heading in a direction that's different than the city, than the residents are. Like I said before, we're not San Francisco. We're not Portland. We're not Seattle. Yet that seems to be the direction of the council. My goal as a council person, as somebody who's running, is to try to bring honesty, integrity, and solid decision-making into the council. Like you, I see a city council that seems really, from my perspective, they seem to be afraid to address the homeless crisis. I see a clear rise in crime and drug use. Going door to door, I have had literally mothers of young children crying, saying, I can't take my kids to the parks in Mcminnville anymore. I'm going to Yam Hill. I'm going to Carlton. I'm going to Dayton. I'm not taking my kids here anymore. Because why? I'm finding needles under the bushes because of sex acts that are taking place. That's not okay in Mcminnville. And it's time for the city council to stand up and do something about it. Like you, I see staffing and morale problems at the fire department that need to be addressed. And I want to help you, somebody who solves that. Like you, I see rents and housing prices increasing and little seemingly being done to address it. Now I realize it's a complex situation. Like you, I'm perplexed by the Alpine Street head-scratching development. And like you, I view policies like the bag ban as a clear symptom of the problem, not the solution that our citizens want. I want you to know everything that I put in print. I got a pretty good attack from some critics over something I put in print. I want you to know everything I put in print I believe to be true, and I have facts to substantiate it before I print it. I won't put anything on my signs that are not true. I won't put anything in print that are not true, because honesty in politics is important. Integrity in politics is important. And if you elect me, I'm asking for your vote. If you elect me, I promise I will represent you with honesty and integrity in everything that I do. Thank you.
Sal?
So, first of all, I'd like to thank City Club for giving me the opportunity to speak today in this debate. Obviously, there are some clear differences between me and my opponents. I feel like I have the most public policy experience and strongest background to represent this city. I also think I represent a broader segment of people than either my opponents, and especially Chris. I've been interested in hearing Chris make sort of snide comments about the wine industry, about people moving here, about how he's lived here for 30 years. I've lived here for 20. And I just think that we need someone who is going to represent more than just a narrow slice of the pie. To my knowledge, I think Chris has been endorsed by Oregon Right to Life, Oregon Firearms Federation, and the Yamhill County Republicans. I don't think he's actively promoting those endorsements. But to me, they reflect a very partisan point of view, a very narrow point of view, and I think that we need someone on the city council who represents the entire city and the overall population. I couldn't honestly tell you what the party registration is of anybody who's on the city council. I can tell you that they're all problem solvers, and they're all people who want to work collaboratively to solve issues. The other thing I'd say is that when you're running for public office, it's in part it's a popularity contest, so it's important to get out and talk to people. But in part, it's also a job interview. And when somebody's interviewing for a job, I think it's important that you look at their references. In my case, my references in this election are the Mcminnville Firefighters Association, who has chosen me to kind of be one of the point people to address their critical staffing need. My reference is Ron Noble, the former chief of police and current state representative. His opponent, Ken Moore. Brian Boquist, the state senator, Republican state senator. Kim Thatcher, Republican state senator, and both of the Democratic legislators who touch this district. And the reason for that is that I'm a problem solver. I've worked with all of those people for a period of many years to address issues, and I'd like to continue doing that. It's the one reason why I decided to run for this office. This is a volunteer position that is absolutely consuming. And I spend 20 to 30 hours per week of volunteer time addressing the city's business, and I ask for your vote to send me back to continue doing that. And Mr. Fenner, I don't care if you believe it or not, Kim Thatcher did endorse me, so did Ron Noble, so did Brian Boquist, so did Newt Bueller.
I believe Ron Noble. Sure, I believe that. Kim Thatcher, I don't.
Well,
I'd still like to know why you...
Can we let Leanna give her, sir, can we let our third candidate give her concluding statement, then you guys can have a side conversation? Thank you.
I don't get to ask that in public.
Because he's currently
Leanna?
serving, sir.
So,
He was never elected, man.
Thank you
He's
again.
appointed, so you can't, how do you say?
Sir, sir, can we let her, can I give her a concluding statement?
Oh, I'm sorry,
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
So, thank you again for City Cloud for inviting us all out to get the opportunity to speak to McMinnville on a higher level. But I agree with Sal that it is a job interview, and I hope that our backgrounds do get considered when it comes to the time of election. You know, we put out information in the voters pamphlet that I think reflects our backgrounds and our experience. I think I bring breadth of knowledge and experience on my own through this race. Of course, I'm not in a comparison, but yet we are. We are wanting to get proper leadership in place and people that can look at things from a perspective that the city wants, the city needs, the city desires. You know, when it comes to endorsements, I don't properly put out the endorsements, but I definitely have quite a few people out there that support me as well, and they do it sometimes in retrospect. Because they have had some difficulties putting out signs and the ethical pieces that come along with races. You know, I believe that a nonpartisan race should be nonpartisan. It should be a time where you are putting it out to the community that you support everyone. Everyone in your neighborhood. We are running for a ward. All three of us are ready to take up arms and support our neighborhood. But we aren't just on city council helping make decisions for our neighborhood. We're helping create a community. We are a collaborative council. You know, this is an area where you have to be involved. You have to sit on committees in order to be effective and know what your city is doing. You know, come out and be involved as well. This is the first time that I've ran for city council, but I definitely have 15 years of government experience. I have a business background, finance. I walk through strategic planning. I'm involved with Homeward Bound Pets, and I took them leaps and bounds through their process as well. I hope that you'll vote for me. LeannaGotney.com, my blog. I put out ideas. Communicate with me online. Communicate with me face to face. I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you, all three candidates, for coming and answering these questions. Could we give a round of applause for all three of them, please?